Greetings. Yes, this is Martin Murphy here at Ariana's Restaurant. We're back doing some cooking videos. Our goal is to try and do one each week. It's taking a little while to get back here. I got my wife Nancy, she's behind the camera there. She's going to take care of all of that. Today we're going to start off with just a pretty simple fish stew. It's something that we work that's on our restaurant menu that's fairly popular. But going forward, I want to start doing more involved recipes, give you a lot more information. There'll probably be 15 to 20 minute videos coming forward. And we hope that this is something you'll want to enjoy and see. It's something I'd love to do is teaching. So what we're going to do today is start off with a fish stew. So the first thing we do is you sort of make the base. Nice saute pan, not high heat, and we're going to use olive oil, extra virgin olive oil. So in the past I've talked about it. I do not cook on high heat with extra virgin olive oil. When we're going to sear the cod, so we're going to do a cod in this sort of fennel leek broth with a little bit of sherry, a little bit of tomato, marinara, veggie stock. But here we're going to sweat the vegetables, so that's the big difference in cooking. We use the term sweat, means we're going to slowly cook the fennel and leek to start with, whereas we will sear the cod in a separate pan. We want to do that to get a nice crust to it, and then we'll add that to that. But that will use our canola oil. It's an oil that's going to be cooked at high heat. So again, we never want to cook at high heat with olive oil. So here, I've got some fennel and leek. I'll show you what we do. Two of my favorite aromatics. You work a lot with it. Spread them out. Season a little bit. We use a little bit of salt. Again, I talk about seasoning in the beginning. This is kosher salt. Not very much, but we use some. And this is some of our, sort of our, what we call a Braised spice mix. It has a nice sort of Mediterranean flair of herbs and some spices. And a little bit of that. It's key to get the vegetables in there salted in the beginning. The salt helps bring out the flavors. We're not hearing any noise. We don't want to get any color in these vegetables. We want them to just sort of simmer slowly. Fennel, one of our favorite herbs. It's simple. It has a little core inside of it. You want to take the fennel tops off. Those long things that look like celery are very fibrous. You can take the fennel fronds off and dice them up. They can be a nice garnish. But what we do is you just kind of cut the fennel bulb in half, and then a simple cut like that. You come across it and you remove the core. And then just, it's a simple back and forth motion. Knives are designed, they have a slightly curved edge, so you can just literally keep the hand down and just have the knife run back and forth and slowly cut through it. You don't need to be making a chopping sound. This is the way that the knife is designed, and the knife never leaves the board. And same thing with leek. The leek we split in half lengthwise, take some of the outer leaves out because sometimes dirt gets caught in there, and then we just do a simple half moon slice, same thing. Your hand is sort of like a claw here, protecting yourself so that you don't cut. And what happens is sometimes the knife slips, it'll hit your nails, and the nails are almost like a natural knife guard in your hand. So this is our little mix of vegetables that we have. Certainly we can prep things ahead of time. At the restaurant, there's a little bit more speed. We will actually have the broth made up ahead of time, everything. All this, the sauce, everything will be made up ahead of time. And then we will just sear the fish, put it in the pan, and then slowly cook it. It's about a 4 or 5 minute cook time. So just here, I'm starting to hear a little bit of sizzle. We're seeing some extra liquid in the pan. That's the vegetables that are releasing their juices, their flavor. We don't want to evaporate that out. So we're ready right now to deglaze. We're going to add a little bit of sherry. We use a dry sherry. It's one of my favorite things to cook with. We use a lot of sherry here at the restaurant. Cooking with open flame, you want to be careful. It's high heat, and you put alcohol into there. It is a fortified alcohol. It's about 17–18%. It could cause a flame. Right now it's diluted some, so we're not going to have a problem with that. But just be careful on high heat. If you have open gas and you put some alcohol in there, you could get a little burst of flame, flambe. Now we do like to add a little acid. So this is a little sherry vinegar. Sherry vinegar is a wonderful product to use, but a little bit goes a long way with your acids. If you don't have vinegar, I mean, you can use lemon juice. It's also orange. This is kind of similar way to the French bouillabaisse, where they like to use orange in there with it. Orange and fennel work together very, very nicely. Then we're going to add a little bit of veggie stock. We make our own veggie stock. We always like to have veggie stock around. It's better than water. Water doesn't have flavor. Veggie stock has flavor. And then this is some of our marinara. You can use sort of a crushed tomato product if you wish. We're just going to get that moving around in here. I want the thing about this broth, it's on the thinner side. Sometimes I have like a shellfish stew or a fish stew of some sort. and I see that the sauce it's in is really heavy and thick. That is not my preference. I definitely prefer to have it lighter. So right there we're simmering away. So we can get ready to start searing the cod. I'm going to get so this is going to be, so this is the canola oil, okay? We like canola oil. And here we do want to get the heat up pretty high, okay? It's important to cook with a hot pan, as I mentioned this time and time again, because you want the protein to sear, and you want to get a nice color to it, but you also want to make sure that it doesn't sweat. We talked about sweating the vegetables. Well, that's what they're doing. They're releasing their juices. If you put the cod into the pan, and it's low temperature, the cod is going to sweat also before the pan heats up. You don't want that to happen because you're losing the flavor of the cod itself. Cod right here, beautiful cod loin. A little bit of salt, again kosher salt, not very much, a little bit of our bread dipping spice mix, and then we're going to take some fresh parsley. Get a nice crust on there, because again visually, the rich green on top of the fish looks nice. We use flat leaf Italian parsley only. That's the only parsley that we use. It's called Italian parsley flat leaf. The curly parsley I find is a little bit harsher on the palate, so we definitely prefer to use our flat leaf Italian salt parsley. And what I want to do is, you can also tell in the pan, I have probably a little more oil in here than I need, but we are going to pan fry it. I'm going to remove the cod from this pan and finish off in the stew. But you can tell by the viscosity, the oil starts getting clear, starts moving around very quickly. I know that the temperature is getting there. If I'm not sure, I can just take a piece of parsley. I can see already, yep, you're seeing that it's starting to sizzle, starting to pop. That's what we're looking for. So we put this in carefully. There we go. That's the parsley. The parsley has some water into it, so when the water hits high heat, you get that little bit of a splatter. I know people at times always get nervous in the house, in the kitchen, you make a little bit of mess when you saute. It's going to happen. You can use a little less oil, but certainly that oil in there we like, there's some of it. Turn the heat down slightly, and here I want to leave it alone. I'm going to leave this alone for a minute and a half. I want to get a really good sear on it. In the meantime, the broth here is simmering very nicely. I'm going to give it a little taste to check out my flavor. We're also in here, we're going to add some Manila clams. So these are from the Pacific Northwest. I'm from Cape Cod, New England. I love hardshell clams. We get this from our great fishmonger, Ethan Wood. These ones come from the Pacific Northwest. I like them. They're a little bit smaller, and they're a little bit tenderer. Less our New England clams. They just tend to be a little bit larger and have a little bit more resistance to the chew. They're great to use. You can use them instead. We just tend to enjoy the Manila clams here. Now what we're going to do is, when the cod goes in, we're going to put the Manila clams in too, and put a nice lid on it, and it's about a 3-4 minute cook time. So as you can see in the restaurant, we can have this broth made ahead of time, or you can. When you have people coming over, have the broth made ahead of time, have it ready. It doesn't even have to be warm. It could be room temperature, even chilled if you make it much earlier. Get the cod seared off. This is where you might actually use a pan like this. You can do 3 or 4 pieces of cod, sear them in there, turn them over, and glaze with the sherry, and then add all the liquid in, and then we can cover it. You can finish it. So right here, we want to make sure we get a nice crust to the cod. So we turn it over, a little bit quick toss it. We're getting some of that nice browning, some of the green color on there, and that sort of makes it look visually appealing. And that's part of the key of what we want to do. Obviously, we eat with our eyes as well. This is done. Take it out, and then we're going to set the cod right in the center right there. I'm going to put in the clams. And also, I'm going to put in a little bit of butter. I like the addition of butter because it's going to give it a little creaminess, a little richness to the broth. Now, I'm going to taste it very quickly and cover 2 things to remember. 1, the butter is unsalted. And number 2, the clams are going to have salt in them. So we want to be careful, because if your broth doesn't seem salty enough, or it needs a little bit more flavor, wait a little bit longer. I like the taste of that. I put a lid on there, and again, it'll be about 3-4 minutes. One other way you can tell is the clams will open up. You want to make sure the clams are open. You don't want to serve clams that are not open. Once in a great while, and if you're curious and the clam is being very stubborn and it hasn't opened yet, you want to carefully remove the clam onto a plate or something different into a small pan and open it, because sometimes there are what are called mudders. Literally, the clams live in the dirt, live in this sand and mud of the floor of the ocean or the bay, whichever. And once in a while, the clam dies, but this fine silt gets inside the shell and fills it up. And if you were just, a little impatient or something like me, which I might be, you try and force the clamshell open in the broth and it's filled with the mutter, you get all this dirt released into the broth and you have to start over again. That's not what you want to have happen. So it doesn't happen a lot, but I have seen it. Now here quickly, so that's not going to take too long. Here we got the beautiful clams. Start to open up a little bit. I just press down on the fish. We always talk about proteins as they cook, they tighten up just a little bit. So there again, that's what we want to see. It's just like we talk about that with steak, with chicken, with any protein pork, just to gently push on it as it starts to firm up. We know that we're ready. Got a couple more clams opening. I'm going to give it another minute, and then we'll be ready to serve. Just about all of them are now open. One more little guy to go. Give it one more taste, get a fresh spoon, on a double dip. Use just a little bit more seasoning now. Now that the clams are open, I know where we are. One of the things, sometimes if you over season, you find it a little too strong, you can add a little bit more wine to it, a little bit more veggie stock, thin it out. So we're just about ready right there. It's going to be served in a nice bowl. Definitely what we do at the restaurant, probably won't do it at home, is we have a little shellfish fork that we can take the shellfish right out of the shell itself, the clams out of the shell. You'd have a little separate dish where you put the clams in, just so it's easier to enjoy the stew as is. Definitely serve this with a spoon. You want to make sure you get all the broth. Alright. Last little guy's almost there. Again, he's opening up, he's fine. I'm not going to force it. It'll just be a few more seconds for him to pop open. And our cod is just about there. Give it a few more seconds. The clams that are open, they're going to be a little resistant to the bite anyway, so you're not really going to overcook them. They're pretty much going to help maintain their texture. I have in the past, sometimes if we're doing a bunch of clams or I'm cooking off clams to make chowder or something, dice them up. As they open them up, I would take them out and put them into a dish. Right here, we're going to go and take the clams. Part of what we want to do is just kind of arrange them nicely around the plate. Then I'm going to put my fish spatula, remove the cod briefly, and then let the broth go in the center. Certainly I have more than enough for one that I need here. It kind of gets some in there. That looks good. We can certainly do a little bit more. And then we set the cod right on top. Set this off to the side. That certainly could be saved for another day, do something else. We have a little bit of fresh parsley in there, clam shell, a little bit of fresh parsley around. And this is a way to make a really nice braised cod. At the restaurant, we'll do it sometimes with chorizo. So sometimes we'll use chorizo as well. It would be called a Portuguese fisherman's stew. Why? Well, the Portuguese found Cape Cod many, many years ago. And traveling across the ocean, they can only bring with them some stuff that's actually shelf stable. So they brought their chorizo sausage. And what did they find on Cape Cod? They found clams and they found cod. And so they took the clams and the cod, used a little chorizo, mixed together a light little broth, usually served with a piece of Portuguese bread. There you have the fisherman's stew. Here, just a nice little fish stew, cod with Manila clams, a nice little broth with fennel and leek. So this is where we start. We'll have plenty more videos coming. And again, I thank you very much from Ariana's Restaurant at the Lime Inn in Lyme, New Hampshire. All of you be well.